Hey, what's up everybody? Thanks for checking out this video. Today, the main point of this video is to go over the match of Frank Chamizo versus Turan Bayramov and see what exactly happened and what the big controversy is. The full match gives way more than the last 3 seconds as far as context, and the match was kind of crazy throughout the entire thing. I'm going to break it down here today and go over the match, why it was so controversial, some of the crazy things that happened throughout the match, and of course talk about things that are going on in the media, where ESPN actually posted an article about this situation and the possible bribery that has gone on. So let's jump into it. Let's get going with this match. I've got it pulled up here. And initially, Bayramov is going to score a back trip. And initially when I watched it, I thought it should have been called 2-2. But as I watch it over again, I definitely think it should have been called a 4 for Bayramov. But then he gets another 2 for a turn, which I think is an absolutely ridiculous call because Chamizo never really actually gets off his back. He never gets to a defensible position. And in the rule book, it states that wrestlers should have to get to a defensible position before a wrestler can score again. So that's the way you always hear about it here in America. You hear the words defensible position, like the guy did not get back to a defendable position, so you can't score another gut wrench. I looked through, there's 2 different rule books, and I looked through both rule books. There's the UWW rule book, and then there's a USA Wrestling rule book. Why is there 2? I have no idea. I think the USA should just go off of the UWW rule book because that's what's going to be used in the Worlds and Olympics, but that's the way it is. So I'm used to the way we call things here in America, and internationally, even our wrestlers have said that some of the things we call here are called very differently when you go overseas. And one of them is the amount of recovery you get after a turn. But even in this situation, I don't think that Frank ever really recovers. He is on his back the entire time. He kind of rolls to a hip and then goes back to his back, and they say that that's another gut wrench. And I just think that that's the incorrect call. All right, let me start with why this is a 4-point throw from feet to back. In the American rulebook, which this isn't in America, and it's not an American wrestler wrestling, so it really doesn't matter. But in the American rulebook, it states all feet to danger situations. A danger situation is a wrestler goes to their back. That's what danger means in freestyle and Greco wrestling. So the American rulebook states feet to danger, basically feet to back, is a 4-point move. However, in the UWW rulebook, it says a wrestler performing a hold in a standing position which brings his opponent into the danger position in a continuous and fluid manner. The way it's presented is if a guy kind of lands on their belly or lands on their chest but is rolled straight through to their back in a continuous motion, that's still a 4-point hold. And we do kind of see that sometimes, like with lat drops in America. As Frank turns, he back trips, Frank lands on his shoulder and is rolled straight through to his back. I think that's definitely a 4-point throw. There's definitely room to say that that was one continuous fluid manner. A hold must not be considered a new action until the competitors return to the initial position. The way I read that is you have to get back to your belly in the parterre position, or you have to get back to your feet or your butt in the neutral position. You can't just be on your back and then get called for multiple exposures when you're never able to get off your back. And here I think it's clear that Frank never really actually got off his back. So that's why I think it should have been a 4 and not a 4-2. But then he never recovers before the turn happens. So he's fighting to get to his hip. He's fighting for like a switch position, but he's still turned. And Bayramov just jumps over to the other side, and that motion puts Frank's shoulders more to the mat, but I don't think he ever recovered. So I don't like the 6-0 call in the first exchange. I think it should have been 4-0. But that's, bad calls happen. That's kind of something that could be forgivable if the rest of the match doesn't kind of turn out the way that it turns out. It just really kind of goes downhill throughout the entire thing. Now, since Frank's down 6-0, he comes out with a pretty fiery pace. He knows he has to get back into this, and if he doesn't attack Bayramov right away, that he'll shut it down, and it's going to be really hard to get those 6 points back. So Frank comes out looking to score and pushing Bayramov around the mat. Now Chamizo hits a really nice snap. He gets to his underhook and then does a back trip and and blocks Bayramov's leg and trips him down to the mat for a takedown to go down 6-2. Now Frank is still coming at him really hard because he's still down 4 points and he is hand fighting like a madman, and Bayramov is backing up and trying to circle and stay in it but just not really engage hard in wrestling, and Frank is putting a ton of pressure on and just snapping, and eventually he snaps Bayramov down. Bayramov tries to get a slip, but he's already down and gives up another takedown. So Frank's down 6-4 with about 15 left in the first period. At the beginning of the second, they come out with a fiery pace. Frank is trying to get in Bayramov's face. He knows he can't win on criteria because of the 4-point throw, so he's got to put at least 3 points on the board without Bayramov scoring at all. Again, he's putting a ton of pressure on Bayramov. He gets to double underhooks, and he's able to drive Bayramov out for a 1-point push out to be down 6-5. Bayramov has done nothing since the initial exchange. He's really just been trying to back up and not engage in wrestling. Backing up, and Frank gets him to step out again. It's 6-6, but Frank is still down because Bayramov has that 4-point throw. And again, Frank just comes out. He's getting really heavy on Bayramov's head and not allowing Bayramov to slow him down with any of the ties. And finally, Bayramov's kind of trying to engage a little bit, trying to hand fight back. He's really just trying to weather this storm from Chamizo. It looks like he can hardly even stand up. He'd be better off with Frank actually taking a shot, which is exactly what happened. So now he can get into actual wrestling positions where it's going to be a huge strength for Bayramov. And Frank's in on a single. He's trying to shelf. Bayramov's defending, and Frank goes back to his back trip and ends up in like a Merkle position. Now Bayramov has to get his leg out in order to score, which he does. Now Frank is not down on a knee or an elbow, so it's not a takedown yet. And Frank is going to walk right out of bounds, which you're not allowed to do. If you go out of bounds on a step out in a wrestling position, it's 1. But if you walk out like Frank just did, it's the step out and then also a caution in 1. So now Frank is again down 2 points with about 45 seconds left, but it might not have been the worst idea in the world because he didn't have to waste time in parterre and possibly get turned. Back in a hole, he needs 3 points again with 30 to go. So this next part is where things really start going off the rails. It makes absolutely no sense. They're wrestling, and Frank is again pushing the pace, and Bayramov is just trying to weather the storm, and as Frank is pushing him back, Bayramov kind of just trips and falls to his back. They give Frank the takedown. They signal the takedown. The referee blows the whistle, and for some reason, unknown to I don't know anybody who understands this at this point, the whistle was not blown before the takedown occurred, but as soon as Bayramov went down, he started pointing to the mat chair's table, kind of trying to signal that something was going on, and they end up not giving Frank the takedown. They white paddle the takedown, but nobody really knows why. So now there's 19 seconds left, and it's still 8-6, even though Frank just scored a takedown. Now this next part of the match gets a little crazy, but the referee blows the whistle before the attack happens because Bayramov is not engaging in wrestling, so they caution and warn him and blow the whistle. Right as they blow the whistle, Bayramov trips and falls on his back, but the whistle has been blown. A lot of people are saying that he was pinned. He could have been pinned. I don't think that the whistle blowing caused that to happen. I think he was going down anyway, but the referee blows the whistle right before that action occurs. It was unfortunate for Frank, but I don't think that it was the referees trying to screw him over in that situation. I think they were trying to help him by giving a caution in 1. Now, as we go back, there's still short time left. Frank needs 2 points. He can't win with 1. He's got to go get a takedown, and there's only about 10 seconds left in the match. So Frank is coming at him. Bayramov is again backing up. They again hit Bayramov for a caution in 1, but there's only 3 seconds left. The score is tied 8-8 with Bayramov having criteria with the 4-point throw. Frank's got to go get one with 3 seconds left, and this is what I posted earlier and a lot of people gave me a hard time about. Frank goes and gets a takedown with 0.5 seconds left on the clock. The referee on the mat signals that the takedown was in time and that Bayramov's knee touched the mat. The referees on the mat chair, the judge, and the ref all go and have a conference to discuss whether or not this takedown happened in time. And these 3 referees all agree that Frank did in fact get the takedown. So a lot of people have been hard on these refs, but they initially said that yes, this is a takedown. I don't quite understand this situation as far as the bribery and these officials not doing the best that they could in the situation. Was the match a mess? Yes, it was a match. It was a mess, I think, from the beginning. But I don't think that they were intentionally trying to screw Frank Chamizo over. They gave him 2 caution and 1 points in the last 30 seconds, which if they were trying to screw him, they absolutely did not have to do. Then at the end, they called the takedown. They confirmed it was a takedown. They were trying to say that Chamizo won the match. The people who may have been in on this are the people behind the scenes, the third-party referees that watch this replay and say that it wasn't a takedown because there's clear footage that Bayramov's knee was down, that Frank was behind him with time left on the clock. So it simply just doesn't make sense that this wasn't called a takedown. And then this part at the end is kind of crazy. It sucks. I could understand Chamizo. I probably would have felt the same way. He's trying to talk with the judge and ask, like, what the hell just happened? And Bayramov comes over there and slaps him right on the shoulder and tries to pull him back. He doesn't want his Olympic berth getting screwed up by Chamizo here if he says anything, and is actually getting physical with him. Luckily, both guys handled that okay, but that could have turned into a real situation as far as getting physical with each other. Bayramov ends up getting his hand raised, and Chamizo loses, which kind of brings us to the controversy that's happened off of the mat. And essentially, Chamizo, I first saw this, Chamizo just posted the last 3 seconds on his Instagram, and I made a short post about it, and I hadn't watched the whole match because I couldn't find it. I saw the post the day that it happened. So I tried to look up the match, but it hadn't been posted yet. And then just because of the way my life is, I have 3 kids, my wife's pregnant with our 4th, I got a full-time job, I'm doing my own wrestling stuff for my team right now this week. But life's been hectic. So I didn't get my post out till like Wednesday or Thursday, and this match happened on, I think, Sunday. People are like, you got to watch the whole match. Oh, it's so crazy. All this goofy stuff happened. And it was. The match was a mess. But I don't think that those judges that were on the mat, the 3 referees on the mat, were trying to do anything to screw Frank over. There's too much evidence to show that they weren't trying to screw Frank over. At the end of the match, with them calling the takedown at the end and also giving Frank the 2 caution ones, they put him back in the match. I mean, they didn't have to call those caution ones. If they never call those caution ones, nobody probably says anything. It's the guy that was, the judges that were behind on the computer rewatching it, stating that it was no takedown, that really are the ones that doing something illegal or have been paid off or whatever, trying to get their guy through. And then there's Frank's side of the story, which has been getting kind of crazier and crazier as things have gone on. And his initial post was kind of like, I love wrestling, but you know, I don't like some of the politics that go into it. They basically screwed me out of an Olympic berth this weekend. And I think he was validated in that with a lot of backup from other wrestlers and other people basically saying, yes, I saw this match and I agree that things were not called the way they should have been called. And things were outside the rules. Then Frank comes out and says that he was offered a $300,000 bribe from Azerbaijan in order to throw the match, and he turned that bribe down. And then ESPN picked up that story, kind of become this thing that's becoming more popular or just taking on a life of its own in the wrestling world at least. And now I'm even seeing reports that the Azerbaijan referees are not going to be allowed to ref in the Olympics, which, if it's those 3 guys that were on the mat, I don't really understand because they made the call to say that Frank won the match. So that doesn't totally make sense to me. If they're saying that the Azerbaijan guys that were behind the scenes, that were the third-party judges, those guys aren't allowed in the Olympics, I would agree with that because I think there was something really fishy going on there. The other part of that story is that Frank is going to end up having to go to that last chance qualifier, compete in that, hopefully win that, so he is outright in the Olympics. But it's a really interesting story. It's definitely a crazy match. It's actually a really fun match because there's a ton of scoring. It's a great story watching one guy score early and the other guy fight his way back into the match the whole time. Unfortunately, it just ends in something that objectively looks like Frank Chamizo was cheated. All right, that's all I got for you this time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, like the video, click the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys on the next one.